book, my third book, Getting Real, Challenging the Sexualization of Girls, had been published. And a lot of people were contacting me and saying, we know what the research says. We know that sexualizing girls has a negative impact on their physical and mental well-being, but what are we going to do about it? And one of the contributors to Getting Real wrote to me after the book came out, and she said, your book is a collective shout against the pornification of culture. And those words just leapt out at me, and I thought I need an excuse to use those words. It was really exciting to contact women and say, I've got this idea, what do you think? And one of them, Melinda Liszewski, we'd already done a bit of activism together, and she just seemed, the obvious one to call first.
A couple of years before Collective Shout started, I knew Melinda, and this was like a precursor to Collective Shout, a foretelling of what Collective Shout would become. And it was when this event called Blokes World was going to be held in Brisbane. And I found out about it because there was large advertising with a woman in lingerie and two fully dressed blokes standing beside her. And it just made me mad because I'd seen the show late at night. And it was just really reached into the pornography industry for their show. And so a friend of mine egged me on, I said we should do something about it. And she goes, yes, we should. And then I was on an email list with Melinda and I got in touch with her. And she egged me on. And then through the email list, people started contacting advertisers, and one by one the advertisers pulled out. And then I think someone ended up contacting the Brisbane City Council, and somebody reviewed their liquor licence, so they lost their liquor licence the day before the event. Anyway, it was a really exhilarating win, and it was exhilarating for a lot of women in Brisbane in particular because everybody did something different, everyone had a different role to play. And so a few years later when Melinda contacted me and said, I've got an idea for an organisation called Collective Shout, do you want to be involved? Would you help me run a website? And I'm like, sure, I don't know how to run a website, but I'm happy to do what I can. Anyway, and she said, don't worry, we'll train you.
There was a lot of excitement in the early stages. I mean, I think really we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, which was probably a bonus, really.
Really, I think in the first year Collective Shout was running, I was involved, but not as Collective Shout. I was just starting to follow campaigns and get involved that way. At the time, I was a young mother. I had 3 young children, and I remember feeling frustrated that I had my kids, and inside my home I could sort of teach them the values that I wanted to teach them and limit their media consumption and think about things like that. But that when we went outside, when we went to the shops and things like that, they were exposed to so many things that were really contradictory to the values I was trying to instill in them about the worth and dignity of women, and that women should be treated with respect. And we'd go to the shopping centres and see pornographic magazines next to the lollies, or pornographic t-shirts in display in windows or being worn by men, and sexist advertising. And I think here I am as a young mother trying my best to teach my son and my daughters these certain values and attitudes about women and women's place, and that's just being undermined. And that just made me really frustrated, just thinking I am powerless. I feel powerless, and it makes me angry that my kids are being exposed to this. So that for me, Collective Shout was the means to not be powerless anymore.
Your everyday person who isn't familiar with the research can see something and have that gut feeling of there's something wrong with what's happening here. There's something wrong with the fact that I've taken my kid into this shop and there's pornography at eye level. And there's something wrong with this advertising that's showing, sexualizing women, but maybe they don't have the words, they don't have the language to use. They might make a complaint and then they get fobbed off. And that makes them feel isolated and like, oh, well, they're just overly sensitive. But then we come to them, or they might find us, and we have the evidence to say, no, you're not wrong. Academic research backs you up. Not only that, but decades of academic research backs up your gut feeling. And here are the tools that you can use when you go to make your next complaint. The more people who join in, that's actually the secret ingredient is them adding their voice and being persistent.
I think when you turn up to a Collective Shout presentation, you are somewhat aware of the issues, but it's not until you see how pervasive it is that the sexualisation, the objectification of women, pornography, it really is infiltrating every aspect of our lives. And as I saw each of the images on the screen, I could identify a time and a place where I had experienced something similar. And it brought up memories of even just walking to school and waiting at the bus stop and men yelling out the car window, you know, when I was 12 or 13 years old, and things that I had shrugged off in the past. And then the build up of that. And now by this stage I was in my 20s, and just being able to hear that we can do something about this. This is not okay. Who said this was okay? We can change this. So that was a light bulb moment for me.
When I initially started noticing things like pornographic t-shirts at my kids' school or in Kohl's or hanging in the shopping centers, and just something in me really rose up, and I knew it wasn't right, and I thought, how is this so? How did we get here? And so I did a bit of research, and of course Melinda, Tankard, Reist, and Collective Shout came up, and it just really struck me that there was somebody who was already onto this and speaking up on these issues that were really hitting us hard. And so it was exciting. It was exciting to discover them and to see what they were already going out on. We weren't these isolated people with these old-fashioned prudish ideas, which was exciting. Collective Shout really put language to our feelings and our thoughts, and that was very empowering. I learned that it wasn't a matter of personal offense, but it's really a matter of universal harm. And I loved how Collective Shout just put language to what we knew was wrong.
When I first started writing on this issue 10 or more years ago, sexualization wasn't that well known. It wasn't even a word that was in the public lexicon. The harms of porn to children wasn't very well known. In fact, in the early days, my colleagues and I were made fun of for speaking out about this and for trying to warn of what was to come. Now the evidence is so solid that many of those critics in the early days have gone quiet.
When this stuff is just out there and it's so unremarkable that women are sexualized and objectified, it's normal, it's the way it is. And you feel like, oh, is the problem me? Am I the one? Because no one's saying anything. And then you finally find, thousands of people around the country who are recognizing this is a problem, who are recognizing this is harmful to women and to children and to men. And to find that, it's like a relief. It's like kind of this sigh of relief, like, okay, it's not just me. There are other people who get it, and we are going to do something about it.
I think when I first joined Collective Shout, I remember emailing the team and saying I saw this ad on a van, what can I do about it? And I got a reply back straight away. Here are the steps that you can take. Here's your avenues for complaint. Here's what you can say. I felt really equipped straight away just from that one engagement to do something about it myself. So that gave me a voice. From there, I remember tackling Lonely Planet Guide during the Wicked Campers campaign. And I thought, hey, they're advertising Wicked Campers in their guide. Surely that doesn't align with their values. So I looked them up on Twitter and saw they had a Twitter account. And I sent out 2 tweets, and shortly after they wrote back and said, we're going to be removing this from our guide. And so that's as easy as that was to have that.
Yes, the issues we take on are very serious, and serious harm being done to women and girls in Australia and around the world. But we've actually had fun addressing it. We've had some really quirky and interesting, amusing kind of campaigns. I remember one of our colleagues in the early days ran around Diva headquarters in a bunny suit, a rabbit suit, and we were criticising Diva, a jewellery company for little girls, for selling Playboy type products. So she dressed up as this giant rabbit and just run amok at Diva headquarters. I think we called her Mixie, as in myxomatosis,
I think every win kind of inspires you to keep going. It spurs you on. It makes you feel that you can see change, and we are making change. Probably one of the standout ones for me is Zoo Weekly, just because, when we looked at the content of that magazine, it was so bad. Like, we described the content as, we said they were rape manuals, because it wasn't just sexist and degrading imagery, but the language and predatory violation kind of narratives around women and girls. And just things that you look at it and you think, this is not right, this is not okay, how is this okay? And then to actually feel like, well, it doesn't have to stay that way. We can change it. And then to have Coles withdraw those magazines from sale and subsequently for them to, the whole magazine to fold, it's just that satisfying feeling of we don't have to accept this stuff, we can change it, and sometimes it does change.
We had a win with 7-Eleven where we'd been plugging along with a campaign where we have to, we've bought these magazines, we've photographed them, we've had to use these images to sort of expose what they're doing and what they were selling, which was magazines with, frankly, their pornography. For 7-Eleven to do something about that, we had to really persevere, we had to go through this content. So when it was finally announced that the CEO was pulling these magazines from 700 stores, it was funny. It took a few days to settle in because I thought that was going to go on for longer. So that's an example of a campaign that maybe in the past it was trickier to get a result like that with this issue, but that makes me feel like we've made a lot of progress, that we've got that result.
So we have a few things that have come together, that critical mass combined with an understanding of the problem, the harms of sexualising children, the harms of objectifying women, the harms of porn culture more broadly, and the platform that is social media, all those things working together. It's so easy to get our message out quickly.
I would just say be part of the shout, and that actually requires using your voice. It's an incredible platform, and anything from as small as liking a social media post to sharing it to making a comment. Those things might sound small and insignificant, but when 35,000 people join together and do that, it's very powerful.
I imagine just having a bigger, greater, stronger movement with more people all around the country. I imagine, again, having more legitimacy, a greater understanding of these issues just in the wider culture. I imagine having more, like I said, just general more support, more people involved, more funding, the means to do so many things that we could do, but we just are limited right now. But we could be running so many campaigns. There's so many things we could be tackling if we just had the means. So I feel like that is all kind of in the future. That's not too far off. We'll really be able to take on a lot and just move through a lot.
I think we've had a huge impact on our society, recognising the connection between advertising and marketing and attitudes, and how those attitudes then influence behaviour and how that behaviour then impacts relationships. So we see that with discussions about domestic violence and gender inequality. Now we'll mention the research about how the representation of women in media impacts gender inequality and violence against women. And so that's a message that we amplify, and we can really help bring those links together in our campaigning.
It's been very encouraging for us at Collective Shout to see more men wanting to get involved, more men saying, what can I do? How can I address harmful messages about what it is to be a man? How can I help my friends to see that these toxic messages about masculinity are harmful to them? I think more men are realising that they've got to step up to the plate, that they can't leave it all to us, that it's going to take everyone to work together to bring about change. What's been even more encouraging to me is seeing young men rejecting pornographic scripts for their lives, rejecting the predatory approaches of the sex industry that give them distorted ideas about bodies, relationships and sexuality. It's been wonderful to see more boys saying, we don't want to be that kind of man. We are going to speak out and do something to stop this.
When I think about the future of Collective Shout, and I think about some of the lines that we've used in our mission and vision statements, and we think about a world where the sexualisation of children is unthinkable, and that's what I would like to see, and I would like to be a part of that. I have a great amount of hope for the future of this country and what might be normalised and what might be okay. And I'm going to continue to speak out against the things that are not okay And I mean, we already have tens of thousands of people supporting our movement, and I can see that just continually growing. It's almost like a collective shout army, and it really just, it excites me to see what's going to change in the future, and what we might see as the wallpaper of society now is the pornification of women. We can create a new wallpaper, and I want businesses that sexualise women to be the minority in the future. And obviously, if we were to win our campaigns to the point where there was no more sexualisation and objectification, there wouldn't be a need for our movement. So, you know, that's the ultimate goal, is to put ourselves out of a job, really.